Ideological subversion is the slow process which we call either ideological subversion or active measures, активные мероприятия in the language of the KGB, or psychological warfare. What it basically means is to change the perception of reality of every American to such an extent that despite of the abundance of information, no one is able to come to sensible conclusions in the interests of defending themselves, their families, their community, and their country.
You just have to flood a country's public square with enough raw sewage. You just have to raise enough questions, spread enough dirt, plant enough conspiracy theorizing that citizens no longer know what to believe.
See, in my line of work, you got to keep repeating things over and over and over again for the truth to sink in, to kind of catapult the propaganda.
This is the kind of thing that we see done in media. This is the kind of thing we see done in politics. This is the kind of thing we see done in pretty much every sector and level of society. We see the psychological tactics that the CIA has used, the Rockefeller Foundation has used, the Beast has used. A lot of it has to do with sex and sexual trauma. We see those tactics being employed because they've been perfected, I believe, on an unsuspecting, for the most part, unsuspecting population, not just in the United States, but globally. So when I see a story like MrBeast partners with Rockefeller Foundation, I'm not the only one who thinks that's suspicious. I'm not the only one who thinks, also, to be objective, you got a guy who's extremely famous, a guy who has been known on the internet for a very, very long time. He is the world's #1 creator. Why wouldn't the Rockefeller Foundation partner with someone like this? And considering that there are some people, a very small handful of people that have looked into the background of MrBeast and the people that, and the groups that finance and fund his, I guess you could call it a movement, organization. I mean, we're talking hundreds of millions and millions of billions of dollars. We're talking money that is kind of hard to fathom, money that is kind of hard to grasp, to understand. MrBeast makes about $700 million a year. And you might wonder where all of that money comes from. A lot of people think, oh, he just made some money on YouTube. I mean, that means YouTube made 300 million and he made about $1 billion because they collect about 30%, I believe it is. MrBeast brings in about $700 million a year. He's been criticized for giving very little to charity. He's also been propped up for giving a lot of money to charity. It's all PR. And of course, anytime someone like this is very, very popular and very, very well known and very wealthy, public conspiracy theorists get suspicious, understandably so. People get suspicious, especially if they've made a YouTube channel and they can't get anybody to watch their videos, and then they see MrBeast making all this money and he must work for the feds. People have accused me of working for the feds. People have accused me of working for the FBI or the CIA. Utterly absurd, baseless, ridiculous claims, but because someone else does better than you, they must be working for the feds. This is something that I think needs to be said, because this is an accusation that gets leveled against pretty much anybody on the internet who's doing better than you in regard to their popularity. And MrBeast is an example of this. He's probably the best example of this. He's going to naturally, because of his position, his fame, and his wealth, he's naturally going to be an easy target for those kinds of accusations. So I want to be very clear that that's not why I am talking about MrBeast tonight on the show. I'm not talking about him because he's making billions of dollars or because he's working with the Rockefeller Foundation and he's a philanthropist and he's a good guy. I'm talking about him because I could acknowledge and separate the fact that there are people who are delusional, who think that everybody on the internet is a Fed. And then there is legitimate concern for the background of the Rockefeller Foundation, who MrBeast is, what he promotes, the money that is involved in the stuff that he does. And there's a huge difference between someone working directly or indirectly with an agency or an organization to sway public opinion, and people that are just idiots on the internet. And don't be fooled. You know, people talk about the dead internet theory. They say, well, half the internet's dead and most of it's bots and a lot of it's, federal agencies. And yeah, there's a lot of that, but there's equally a very large number of people who are just idiots and have no idea what they're talking about. And because they have, a record button, they have a microphone, they can say whatever they want. And if you know how to manipulate search engines and you know how to get your content out there, you can have nothing to say, but you can become very famous and popular because you know what buttons to push, or you know how to game the system, or you know how to pay a lot of money for advertising. There's a lot of content out there like that. So that's my initial, analysis and thought of a creator, let's say, as they call him, like Mr. Beast. He's into philanthropy. His charitable organization is called Beast Philanthropy. And again, his name is Jimmy Donaldson. I think everybody knows this guy. Anytime I've seen him, I've always thought that he had one of those weird looks or one of those weird smiles on his face, not because, again, he's rich or famous or something like that, just because I don't know. He just has that look. And I'm not the only one who says this or thinks this. A lot of people think this. You look at this guy and you're thinking, there's just something off about him. Maybe there's not. I don't know. Maybe there's not something off about him. But you can usually tell when you look at somebody. You look at a Mr. Beast, and this is purely subjective. But you look at Mr. Beast and you look at that face and you compare it to, say, I don't know, you compare it to a David Rockefeller. You compare it to a Henry Kissinger. People that you look at and you're like, I don't know if I can trust you. I don't know if I can trust this person. Purely subjective, but maybe it's not so purely subjective. Maybe there is a hint of objective pollutant in it, because it is kind of true. Like when a woman is pregnant, she radiates. When a woman is ovulating, she radiates a kind of a light, a glow. It could be hormones. It could hormones in the sense of like, or pheromones that you smell and you see this woman is more attractive when she's ovulating, or she's got new life inside of her, so she's radiating outward. It's definitely a result of hormonal changes and things like that. Then you look at people that do really bad things, and you look at like David Rockefeller, and you think, yeah, I don't know if that's a good guy. And he was old. Rockefeller was very, very old, right? But that doesn't mean that he doesn't look evil even in his younger days. There's a look in his eyes too. There's a similar kind of a look, like they're trying to smile, but they don't really know how to smile. Again, largely subjective, but there's a hint of objective pollutant in there somewhere. So this is Mr. Beast, and this is what he does. He is a very famous, quote, content creator. I think most of you know that. I think it goes without saying. We can pull up on YouTube Mr. Beast, and you can see his hundreds of millions, billions of views at pretty much any video that he publishes. Tens of millions of views, including doing some very risky stunts like putting people in burning buildings and seeing if they can escape, going into old nuclear bunkers, things like that. So again, I know that most of you know that, but we have to form kind of a base foundation for the show, especially for people who don't know about this. This video that you see on your screen right now, and if you can't see it because you're listening in the audio archive, this is Mr. Beast alongside of the man who runs the Rockefeller Foundation. And they are speaking about the partnership that they have. Let's listen to this video. Let's see what this partnership is all about with the head of the Rockefeller Foundation.
I'm Rod Shaw, president of the Rockefeller Foundation. I'm here today with Jimmy Donaldson, better known as...
And the video is Joseph
and
Rees.
we are together, the
Let me go back because the video froze.
Rockefeller Foundation. I'm here today with Jimmy Donaldson, better known as
Oh, it froze again.
and we are together, the Rockefeller Foundation and MrBeast, launching a great new partnership together. Yes, we're going to try to inspire the youth all around the world, change lots of lives, lots of big projects coming up. We'll tell you more about it in the future, but I'm honored to be working with the Rockefeller Foundation and Let's Change the World. And we're excited to work with Jimmy and his awesome team. They are already helping kids in Africa and around the planet. We're going to take that to the next level together, and we couldn't be more excited.
Oh, yeah. Very, very excited. The Rockefeller Foundation loves helping children, if you were not aware of that. They really like helping kids. They don't have any shady past whatsoever. Not at all. They're really, really good people at the Rockefeller Foundation. Remember when the White House paid, under the Biden administration, influencers for COVID propaganda? White House enlists 50 TikTok online users for vaccine promotion. Remember when the Trump White House, I'll pull this up, had mega influencer bots that went out there and defended everything, including Jeffrey Epstein? AI bot network of the Trump administration. Okay, we can't trust the Rolling Stone, though, or NBC News. Okay, well, then I guess you can't trust Business Insider when they reported that the Biden administration did pretty much the same thing. Very little of what you see or hear is honest or in good faith. Most of it, much of it, is pushed by these players. I'm going to now remove our screen share, and I will bring up the next selection of stories as we bring on our guest here in just a moment. Our guest tonight is Ryder Lee from Raised by Giants. You can find him on YouTube. You can also find Ryder on a number of episodes of TST Radio over the years. Ryder and I have been friends and colleagues for several years. And you can find Ryder Lee's various documentaries. I'll let him mention those. You can find those various documentaries on Amazon Prime, if I have that correct. He can correct me if I'm wrong, including JFKX and, a really great documentary about psychological operations in The Shining. I know he's also working on another documentary about remote viewing, and a lot of this ties in with our subject tonight, including what you see on your screen right now. Back in 2022, the U.S. military Fort Bragg PSYOP unit recruitment video. Remember that Ghost in the Machine? And then there was a Ghost in the Machine recruitment video in 2024, a part 2. And now, which is what inspired Ryder and I to start talking, and I prepared tonight's show, was the Fort Bragg Psychological Warfare Group posting another video this year, just a few days ago, another psychological operations, quote, recruitment video. We'll look into that and the connections all of that has to the Central Intelligence Agency and their behavioral sciences, which also includes the Kubark Counterintelligence Interrogation Report from 1963. And if you read that, you can find pretty much all the techniques and the tactics that are now employed against the American public, or just, I guess, civilians anywhere you look in the world. So let's bring Ryder Lee onto the show. I know he's been waiting patiently behind the scenes, behind the stage. Ryder, thank you for joining me on the show tonight, my friend. Hello, howdy. Welcome to the show. How are you?
I am doing great, Ryan. Thanks so much for having me on. Really appreciate it, brother. Always an honor and a privilege being on the Secret Teachings and having really great conversations with you.
Yeah, I love having you on too, especially because over the years you've increased your knowledge and your understanding of the things that we're talking about tonight, like I have, and you've been working to quite literally document these things in documentaries. You have JFKX, you have your Shining documentary, which I thought, as I've told my audience before, I know Clyde Lewis gave you major props on this too. It's an amazing documentary, and it's a very unique look at The Shining. And it's probably something, if people have not watched it or heard the ideas, it's something that is really kind of mind-blowing. The psychological intelligence apparatus behind that, especially when we looked at Lookout Mountain and the connections to Laurel Canyon and all of this. But, your research, your work connects to, I think, everything I've been discussing tonight, from the Rockefeller Foundation, MrBeast, Aleister Crowley, to Wexner Foundation, to the Tavistock Institute. It's all part of the same psychological beast, I think. Your thoughts, your views, your opinions. I'll give you the floor.
Absolutely. I mean, the Rockefeller Foundation, it was involved in a lot of stuff. They've had their hands in a lot of things: public health, scientific community, agriculture, the pushers of the Green Initiative, global warming, the educational system. They had their hand in creating vaccines at Johns Hopkins, Harvard, and more specifically, influenza vaccines, polio, measles, malaria, which we know that none of those really cured anything. They just changed the definitions of what those diseases and viruses were. You can look into Dr. Suzanne Humphreys for more information on that. And of course, least we forget, the Rockefeller Foundation was also responsible for our schools and the indoctrination systems and, standardized grade levels. They would do all kinds of stuff like compulsory schooling, centralized state level control. They would shift away from small, more localized schooling and like one-on-one type of schooling to more statewide schooling. They created the State Department of Education. They did the certification requirements for schools. They introduced the first uniform curriculum across states, and they also introduced a very heavy indoctrination into the obedience of law. Don't question your leaders. Don't question your superiors. They know best. And that's just to name a few things of how they created the school curriculum. And the big one of that, which a lot of people often cite, was from Frederick Taylor Gates, not Bill Gates, Frederick Taylor Gates, which was involved with the Rockefeller Foundation. And this is a quote from him, which was wanting schools that would produce workers rather than independent psychological thinkers, which is a heck of a quote there. But it wasn't only just public schools. They also did this with colleges as well, such as Columbia, Yale, Harvard. So out of all of the foundations and the companies that MrBeast could have partnered with, he goes with the Rockefeller Foundation, right? That's done so much to help everyone globally, Ryan. They've done so much. They've helped people in South Africa, like he mentioned in the video with MrBeast. They've really helped out a lot. I 100% believe that they have our best interests, but it's just interesting how MrBeast kind of went from this self-made, pulling himself up by his bootstraps and doing all this great investment stuff. Because you just mentioned that the White House had paid a bunch of people. I'm pretty sure that MrBeast was one of those people that got paid by the Pentagon or by the White House. I can't remember what it was for, but I think it was for some kind of content creation. I would have to go back and look at the episode that I did on MrBeast surrounding his TV show on Hulu. Because there was this period of time where people all over the internet was saying that MrBeast was the Antichrist. Do you remember this?
I do remember that. Yeah, probably just because of the name and maybe a hand gesture.
And there was this really weird thing with a TV show that he did on Hulu that was like a series where he was going to give away $1 million. They had this like religious guy on there that was like heavily religious that would pray before he did everything. There was this one point in the show where he had to make a decision to let a bunch of people go on to the next stage of the competition. So he was basically the chooser. So he got on his knees. He made this giant beard. They referred to him like as like the Jesus figure of the show because he was heavily Christian, and he got on his knees and he prayed. he prayed to God, and that was the cliffhanger of the episode of who he was going to pick as his disciples to move on to the next phase of the competition.
Mm-hmm.
Right? And it was all around this time of when people were like, yeah, Mr. Beast is the Antichrist. Which everyone has been called the Antichrist, I think, at one point in time. Peter Thiel is now the Antichrist. Trump has been called the Antichrist. Everyone that has had any kind of popularity has been called the Antichrist. I mean, even Joe Rogan has been called the reincarnation of Aleister Crowley. Have you heard that one?
Of course, yeah, because he's bald, right? Looks like him. I've heard that one, yes.
Yeah, so it's just interesting how Mr. Beast decided to partner with the Rockefeller Foundation. I mean, there's hundreds of other organizations and foundations that he could have partnered with, but he chose this one that has the best interest in everyone's heart, Ryan. So it's just, and that's the thing, is like, they want to make him out to be like this guy, like started from the bottom, and did all this stuff and would just give things away, give money away. That's how he started out, was on social media, on like Facebook and stuff. That's how I first ran into some of his content, was on Facebook Reels, where he would just walk into a McDonald's and have someone do a challenge and then give them like $3,000 to $5,000 like off of the rip. It's like,
you know what it reminds me of? It reminds me of Black Mirror. There's something Black Mirror-y about him. I don't know if that makes sense. I know you watch that show. Something that just seems like it's not real.
I think you described it perfectly in this in the beginning of the show when you said that he's looking like he's trying to smile. That's a perfect analytical representation that you could give. That's the way that he looks all the time. It looks like he's trying to smile. And that's that eerie type of feeling that a lot of people have, just like the Rockefellers. Aleister Crowley has got that type of look about him as well, like he's got a secret, or that he's hiding back something, or that there's something more going on than what meets the eye. Like very mysterious type of oblique type of face that he has on all the time, which is, I don't know exactly what that is, which is probably what leads people to think that he's the Antichrist.
Well, maybe he's a personification or possessed by the spirit of the Antichrist. I mean, this is like what I said with Les Wexner. You look at Les Wexner, and he literally says that he's possessed by a demon. It's not metaphoric. It's not figurative. It's not someone else's opinion. He literally says he's possessed by a demon, and that through this demon, that's how he's gotten wealthy. And through that wealth, through the Wexner Foundation, that's how he's funded all of these movements that are just like what the Tavistock Institute promotes, just like what the Rockefeller Foundation promotes, just like what all of the other philanthropists and NGOs and united groups and nations, and we love people and want to help you. It's the same thing everybody promotes. So, I mean, what are the connections to that is what I started thinking. And then you look at the history of Aleister Crowley, who was inspiration for Alfred Kinsey, who worked for the Rockefeller Foundation, in promoting what amounted to sexual degeneracy and perversity, which then takes us to the work of people like Magnus Hirschfeld, who did the exact same thing in Germany. And it was connected to left-wing progressivism, which is precisely what you see today. As I said earlier, the world's first trans clinic was in Germany. In fact, there was just a story that came out the other day about Les Wexner being in the Epstein estate documents. I can show you that on the screen, which brings the Epstein story into the equation, because Epstein wasn't just Epstein. It was a network of intelligence agencies, the same ones that when the CIA got caught back in, what was it, the 60s, funding coups and funding the undermining, like Yuri Bezmenov said, the demoralization, destabilization of countries and other things around the world. They got caught doing that. So then they started dumping money into organizations and foundations, which included ... the Rockefeller Foundation. And I can actually show you, I don't know if you've seen this document, I'm assume that you have, or it's not surprising to you. Here's a document from the Central Intelligence Agency. You can see this on your screen. Foundations support for research, or foundation support for research in the field of the behavioral science. What is behavioral science? It's psychology. And if you scroll down through this list, what do you find? Other than the Ford Foundation, you find the Rockefeller Foundation. So the CIA was financing the Rockefeller Foundation to carry out their work. And then we can add one more thing to that equation. Here is an article from the New York Times back in the 80s. And if you scroll down in this article, the article is called Missionaries for Democracy, U.S. Aid for Global Pluralism. And if you scroll down in this article, you can find a really interesting little piece here. As I scroll down the article and find it. Here's the section here. I'm going to read this to you. It says, from covert to overt evolution of policy, we should not have to do this kind of work covertly, said Carl Gershman, president of the endowment, who was an aide to Jean J. Kirkpatrick when she was the chief United States delegate to the UN. It would be terrible for democratic groups around the world to see, or to be seen, as subsidized by the CIA. We saw that in the 60s, and that's why it has been discontinued. We have not had the capability of doing this, and that's why the endowment was created. So the CIA was prevented from doing their work, and so they started financing, this is in their own records, they started financing the Ford Foundation, the Rockefeller Foundation, etc.
Private government contractors. I mean, that's how it's always went. That's how it went with MK Ultra. That's exactly what they did once they kind of, the whistle kind of got blown on that in 1975. They were like, okay, well, how do we, continue this research? I know, we'll just contract this out to government contractors and private organizations and different companies that they can do the research for us. And then that's whenever it gets shipped into Canada.
Yes.
At called Ravenscraig, and he created the psychic driving, so the depowdering, the psychic driving, and then it's pretty much like to erase your normal thinking patterns, which is the depowdering, and then feed you drugs, and then psychically drive you to make you believe something happened or make you not believe something happened. It can go either way, right? And that's done through repeated visual stimulus or repeated audio messages. It works in both of those ways. So if you can think about that and just take, VR goggles. We know that the military has been using VR to train their people using video games and VR for a really, really long time. They've been doing that forever. Like video simulations of blowing up tanks, killing people. They will literally have a gun that is just as heavy as a real gun and have a simulation of targets and have you shoot those targets. They've been doing that for a really long time, along with video games and VR. So now you think of that in the context of an MK Ultra style program. If you depattern the person, which is normally done through torture, so you would torture them to a degree to where they lose all of their cognitive abilities and critical thinking. Then you drug them, and then you could put a freaking VR goggles over them and make them believe that any scenario is essentially real. You could reprogram their mind to make them believe that extraterrestrials are real, whatever, alien abductions are real, which it comes into another thing. I don't want to get on the alien. We've done UFOs and aliens into the ground here, but there was this book that was written by this gentleman named Walter H. Ballard, in 1978, called Operation Mind Control, that basically exposes the entire alien and abduction phenomenon, where he wrote that the military would get these kids dressed up in gray alien outfits,
Mm-hmm.
and the military would abduct whatever individual, said individual, whoever they wanted to make them believe that aliens had abducted them. And the kids would act as aliens. They would have the set all made up, make it seem very realistic. And then they would use these drugs and this weapon that they refer to as like a stun gun, which has been used in a lot of MK Ultra programs where they can just hit you with a gun and it knocks you out and makes you go into this like psychotic delusions, like you've been drugged. And then whenever you wake up, it's like it was all like a big, huge blur. And then he talks about how that these people will later on, these memories will come back up in their life later on, and they'll remember them as alien abduction experiments, like that they were abducted by aliens, So if it can go that far, just like with the NSA breaking into Paul Benowitz' house and replacing his computer with a NSA modified computer to make him believe that he's in communication with aliens, if they will go that far to pull off some sort of deception operation, then there's no extent to how far they'll go with anything else.
Well, look at this, for example. So, our audience, I think, knows, but just for the record, the definition of parapsychology is the study of alleged psychic phenomena. That's a Wikipedia article. I don't trust them, so we could go to like Psychology Today or Encyclopedia Britannica. But basically, parapsychology is defined as the paranormal or psychic phenomena. And here is CIA and behavioral sciences, their mind-controlled drug experiments in MK Ultra. This is their records that they released 2024. We could look at that in a little bit. And then look at this, back to the document we were looking at a few minutes ago, Foundation Support for Research, CIA. And here's the Rockefeller Foundation, which included money into the work of parapsychology. I'll zoom in so you can see that. Parapsychology work at the Rockefeller Foundation, right there on the bottom of your screen. And there's the Rockefeller Group getting money for that. Grants to study parapsychology, which tells me that involves, along with the study of gifted individuals. You can see that at the Rockefeller Foundation. That tells me that what you're saying is certainly backed up by CIA records, that they're not saying fake alien abductions or UFOs or something like this, but they're investing tremendous amounts of money officially just in this one document into studying, quote, gifted individuals and into studying parapsychology, which is the real true root basis of the TV show Stranger Things. It's really based on these programs. Whether or not they were successful, they still researched them, and to what extent or level they actually went to, like with the Paul Benowitz story. I'm not saying that's connected to the Rockefeller Foundation, but like with Paul Benowitz, we don't know. But we know that this stuff was for sure absolutely done.
What year was this that they were studying parapsychology and the kids? Well, not the kids, but the gifted individuals.
This particular report was approved for release in 1999. So let's see, the parapsychology work, Rockefeller, 1951. Gifted children, Rockefeller, through Stanford University, 1951.
This is really early on.
Yeah, this was very early on, and parapsychology was done at Duke University. And again, this is just one of many, many documents. But yes, this was two major universities.
This is 100% legit. This is I actually have this section in my latest documentary, Psychic Agent, where this funding was going on from it went to Duke University, it went to Stanford, it went to Yale, it went to Boston, and a few other places to study parapsychology and psychic abilities and gifted individuals, which then later on became known as remote viewing. And then the CIA funded Stanford Research Institute in 1972, which that first program was called Scan8. Scan8, which was to determine if the parapsychology, if this psychic ability actually is real, and if it is real, how can it be used as a military effort? Can we use this ability to spy on foreign countries and gather information. And then it turned out that what they found with people like Ingo Swann and Pat Price in 1972 at Stanford Research Institute, and then that's when Pat Price essentially broke into that Cold War surveillance military base, top secret military base in West Virginia with his mind, and got all that top secret information. And that's the CIA funded SRI from that period of time, and then they cut funding in 1975 when after Pat Price died, and then Russell Targ and Hal Puthoff then went to the Foreign Technology Division in Wright-Patterson Air Force Base in Ohio to get funding from the Air Force to pick up where the CIA had left off in 1975, and then they funded it all the way up until 1980. And then in 1979, the Air Force, the Army, INSCOM, and DIA had an interest in it, and then that's whenever they funded their first program, which then began operations in 1980, right after they had shut down that small remote viewing unit at Wright-Patterson Air Force Base in 1980, whenever they found the missing downed Russian airplane in Africa. A lot of this is spelled out in my new documentary that I'm working on, Psychic Agent, the real life Stranger Things. Have Dale Graff in it, which was responsible. He was the head of that remote viewing unit at Wright-Patterson Air Force Base. It was an unofficial unit, but Rosemary Smith, which was a part of that unit, was the person that found that downed Russian airplane that went missing in Africa. She gave them the exact spot on the map where she saw where the airplane was, and then they converted that into a coordinate, and then a team went to retrieve the airplane, and they found it. So that's just a little bit of history and a little bit of background of the remote viewing unit. But also, though, MK Ultra is involved because they were also studying parapsychology as well, because they found out that trauma within people also activate these psychic abilities within people. So it's kind of repressed in a lot of people's mind, but then whenever they go through that trauma, then all of a sudden those abilities start to come to the forefront of their mind. And that's where our documentary comes in about The Shining and how a Clockwork Shining, that's where it kind of activates, through Danny's trauma of Jack abusing him and breaking his arm. That's whenever he starts having these episodes, is what they call it in the beginning of the movie The Shining. Whenever the doctor comes to visit Wendy and Danny at their apartment in Boulder, Colorado, the doctor asked Wendy and was like, hey, when did he first start having these types of episodes? And she said it was right after Jack had come home really late one night, and Danny had spewed his papers and everything all over the floor, and then Jack came in and yanked him up by the arm and injured Danny's arm. Then he started having these episodes where displaying these psychic abilities, essentially. So that's telling you that trauma is what activates these abilities within people. And we're actually probably getting ready to see, I'm only a couple of episodes in on the new Welcome to Derry series on HBO, but that has a tie-in to The Shining as well. Dick Halloran is actually in the Welcome to Derry series, which is a psychic guy in The Shining that communicates to Danny in his mind, and then finds out Danny is having a really bad time, and then comes and then Jack kills him with an axe. For anybody that's seen The Shining, but there's a connection there too, and I'm willing to bet that it somehow revolves around the traumatization of people. And almost all of these remote viewers, like Ingo Swann, one of the more famous remote viewers, said that he would have out-of-body experiences all the time whenever he was growing up, and that was due to the trauma that he was enduring from other people bullying him because he was gay. Okay, so he would be out of his body all the time because of the trauma that he was enduring. Like, who cares if you're gay? I don't give a shit. I don't care if you're gay. Whatever, it doesn't matter. But what is important is that he had a lot of trauma growing up. So that was that out of body experience that he was having. And then that also gets into the Monroe Institute and how they were trying to induce an out of body experience through the hemisync mind tapes.
Well, that's
Which prob-
probably. Oh, I'm sorry to cut you off. Go ahead.
Well, that's probably just a way to open up your mind, probably funded. And I'm going to get into it in my more recent documentary, but I think we talked about it on one of the last shows that we did. People are remembering hearing these gateway tapes in like public school as well. So it's a way to infiltrate into your mind without actually having to really do any work. I think that it's a disharmonic frequency that these tapes actually are, and it's a gateway, but not a good gateway. It's a bad gateway. It's opening up a back door in order for you to be more susceptible to mind control.
See, that makes me think that what you're saying is definitely connected to Alfred Kinsey, because Alfred Kinsey, I think, and I mean, he was probably a pretty smart guy in some ways, but he was also himself homosexual, and he probably went through, especially for the time period, he went through a lot of, if anybody knew he was homosexual, he went through a lot of probably trauma. And then he was inspired by none other than who inspires a lot of people who have been traumatized or abused or whatever. That is Aleister Crowley. And so here's a guy who's attracted to Aleister Crowley, the drugs, the sex, the rituals, the perception of power. We know Aleister Crowley was British intelligence, among other things. And Alfred Kinsey's attracted to that. And so the Rockefeller Foundation, very official suits, very official statements, you can trust the Rockefellers, went to a guy who was an outcast, essentially, sexually from society, a guy who was attracted to very niche things like weird Aleister Crowley sex rituals, and said, we'll give you millions of dollars. There's like tens of millions in the 40s in today's money. We'll give you tens of millions of dollars to study the effects of sexuality on people, which I'm sure filtered into the CIA's Project Midnight Climax, where they just picked up people, put them on drugs, watched them have sex with prostitutes. That's the CIA. That's all part of this too. And then they're able to weaponize the research and what they get out of that as part of the demoralization and destabilization processes, plus what Alfred Kinsey was involved in, and what Aleister Crowley and the CIA and the Rockefeller Foundation were involved in, is, as I said, the exact same thing. I mean, quite literally the same exact thing that we saw in the 20s in Germany under Magnus Hirschfeld's Institute of Sexual Science. And now we find that present in the Tavistock Institute today, where the Tavistock Institute, as I showed earlier, the Tavistock Institute has for several years been, I think, relatively publicly known, but for people like us, we've known about it longer. But a handful of years ago, back in 2019, the Tavistock Institute, one of the governors working there, quit because they said, and along with a lot of parents, they said that the kids that were there were being essentially psychologically abused and, quote, fast-tracked to gender transitions. So it's the same exact thing, no matter where you look, whether it's in Germany or it's in the UK or it's in the US. It's the Rockefeller Foundation, the CIA. It is these individual institutes or groups, like with Magnus Hirschfeld's Institute of Sexual Science, or now we have the Tavistock Institute. And I'm wondering, back to you, Ryder, I'm wondering, because I honestly have a little bit of a difficult time figuring out how I feel about this. How does this unfold historically? Like when the CIA or when the Rockefeller Foundation or when they discover something, like the power of trauma in inducing psychic experiences, or what we classify as parapsychology, or when you find out that, inducing trauma on a population has this kind of effect, like, what do? Do they sell that information? Do they go directly to the media and, and through their agents and inject certain things into the population? Is it done through Netflix nowadays? Like, how does all of that unfold? I think you've got a pretty good viewpoint on that. If you could maybe help me iron this out.
Do you remember Barack Obama talking about the conspiracy theory stuff?
Oh yeah, for sure. Remember that quote from George Bush, though, the statement he said, you gotta repeat things. And in my line of work, to kind of catapult the propaganda, you got to repeat things over and over again to catapult that propaganda. Take a listen.
No, but I want to hear that. I definitely want. It's for sure something that he would say.
Here's the video clip of it for audio listeners. Here it is.
If you've retired, you don't have anything to worry about. It's the third time I've said that. I'll probably say it 3 more times. See, in my line of work, you got to keep repeating things over and over and over again for the truth to sink in, to kind of catapult the propaganda.
Yeah, let's clap. That's great. It's great. One of many George Bush clips that are similar to that.
That's essentially exactly what psychic driving is. It's repeating the same thing over and over and over and over again. Regardless if it's true, regardless if it's factual or not, regardless if it's false. Doesn't matter. Whatever thing that you want out there imprinted upon the psyche of everyone globally, you just continue to say it. You continue to put it up on the screen. You continue to talk about it, and you drive that narrative home until people believe it. I mean, the best example of that is what happened in the last 5 years. That's exactly what that was. That was a giant, long preparation time for us to, and they wouldn't have done it, Ryan, if they didn't think that they could get away with it.
Well, here's an example.
If they thought that they were going to fail.
And here's an example of what you're talking about. I'm glad that you said that. We can seamlessly transition into this article that I pulled up from the British Medical Journal. This piece says opinion, but note that what they're referencing are from actual people, psychologists and government officials in the UK who work directly on COVID policy in the UK and what they said. So the headline of this British Medical Journal is the UK government's attempt to frighten people into COVID protective behaviors was at odds with its scientific advice. Oh, it's just an opinion piece, right? Well, among the many revelations from recent leaked UK government WhatsApp messages published by the Daily Telegraph is the fact that Matt Hancock, former health secretary, not an opinion, proposed using fear in order to get the public to comply with COVID restrictions. That's not an opinion. That's what he actually said. In December 2020, he wrote that, quote, "We must frighten the pants off of everyone with the new strain." That's a quote. In January 2021, Hancock discussed how to increase levels of mask wearing and worried that minor interventions would have little impact. The cabinet secretary, Simon Case, replied, "I think that is exactly right. Small stuff looks ridiculous. Ramping up messaging, the fear and guilt factor, or the fear-guilt factor, is vital." By the way, on top of that, you might say, well, that's just the UK. Well, how about the United States? How about Yale University? Here's Yale University teaming up with, I believe it was a number of medical schools from, what was it? University. I think that there was the University of, I thought it was New York, but maybe I'm wrong about that. But this is the Yale University report. Look at this. This is a great report. Persuasive messaging to increase COVID vaccine uptake intentions. Here's the various different groups involved: School of Nursing, Study of American Politics, Department of Political Science, Yale University. And if you scroll down, you can find this wonderful list of ways in which they intended to get you to take your medicine. They included self-interest messages, community messages, community interest and guilt messaging, interest and embarrassment, community anger, like people are going to be mad at you if you don't do what everyone else is doing. That was the messaging. You got to do what's best for the community. How would you feel if your neighbor died or your grandma died because you didn't get your shot? One of their messages was, you can read that, Ryder, trust in science. Quite literally, trust the science was a Yale University corporate medical talking point. not based on science, but based on psychology. This included personal freedom, economic freedom, and community economic benefits. We heard all those arguments like, don't you want to go to the movies again? Don't you want to go to the games again, the sporting events? Don't you want to go back to work and make money and pay your bills? That was all part of a psychological operation ran through Yale University to convince you to do something for a corporation. And that's
You know what's interesting about that, Ryan? What's interesting about that is it seems like nobody actually wanted to do any of that because all of those industries are failing. The movie industry is failing. The restaurant business is failing. There's been thousands of restaurants, big chain restaurants that have closed in the past year.
Well, maybe
Buffalo Wild Wings.
that's the
Like-
normalization process, though, I think, probably what you're saying. That's like what Bezmenov said. You normalize these, you destabilize, demoralize, you create crisis. This was the crisis. And then you normalize the results, which were during COVID, what were we told over and over again?
Stay home.
And the new normal. That's the new normal. The new normalization process. And you're right. All those things they're changing dramatically because of what happened during the pandemic. And it was all psychology, not based on medical science, but based on brain science, based on the psychology of the mind.
Well, we know what it was really based on, Ryan. We can call it for what it is. It was based on computer models, just like how everything is based on computer models. Global warming, computer models. How many times, how can we know how many people are going to die from this virus in the next 5 months if all this stuff is, how do we figure that out? Computer model. You guessed it, bro. Like, it's completely ridiculous.
Here's the Pfizer website confirming that Pfizer's novel prediction model derived from machine learning. That's just one of many. You can actually find the original response back to the accusations of gain of function research, where here's the Pfizer response to gain of function research claims. And if you scroll down, it says that, hey, we don't do that. We don't do that kind of research because most of this work is conducted using computer simulations. It says that on their website. It's unbelievable, right? It's Pfizer.com. You made that up. No, it's Pfizer.com. It says that. It's computer models. But you see all that stuff, Ryder. And then look, here's another document. This is the Clockwork counterintelligence interrogation document from the CIA, 1963. It was released in the 1990s. And if you scroll down and you look at the coercive counterintelligence interrogation techniques, this is the same kind of a thing that we saw during COVID. It's the same type of techniques. And for example, utilizing threats and fear, quite literally. Like they're using CIA interrogation torture tactics on the general public. Heightened suggestibility and hypnosis as your nightly news. There's your social media. Just a couple of examples, but that's all from the CIA's, the federal government's Clockwork counterintelligence interrogation program, which of course we learned later that we were quite literally torturing people to get information that led to absolutely nothing. But that's a whole nother show. I wanted to, before we're out of time, Ryder, talk about these recruitment videos this is from Fort Bragg. The first article, this is Army Times. This is back in 2022. The Ghost in the Machine, Who's Pulling the Strings video. Then you have Ghost in the Machine 2. That was 2024. And then recently, this last week, they've released a third video. It's another fourth psychological operations group. This video says, "We are everywhere." We can actually play these videos, but do you have a comment on those fast before we play the videos?
Well, I think that this new one is really interesting because you can't find really the full video anywhere. That's the original Ghost in the Machine. But if you scroll down a little bit, you would see that there's screenshots from other videos, which leads me to believe that this isn't a public thing, because deception operations normally go to people that are already in the military. They're not going to take somebody off the street that just signed up to be in the Army and immediately put them into a deception operation where they're deceiving and running psyops on people. They're just not going to do that. There's too much risk involved. So this one seems more like something, because it's not the entire video. The Ghost in the Machine videos are like 2 to 3 minutes long videos. This one with the new one is, I think that it's like 23 seconds, and it cuts off 37 seconds, sorry. And it cuts off like as he's getting ready to say, there's very little things that people think about when they think of operations or whatever. And he was like, it's in its words. How powerful words are, yeah.
You're right. The third one is very short. I think we can play about 7 minutes total, roughly, over all three of them. So play these, comment, and wrap up the show tonight. Here's Ghosts in the Machine. Even if you can't see this, you can hear it. If your opponent is of choleric temper, seek to irritate him. Pretend to be weak, that he may grow arrogant. Sun Tzu. This video is really creepy, Ryder.
Yeah.
As the world watches and listens in horror, the peaceful pro-democracy demonstration in China comes to a violent and bloody end. Mr. Gorbachev, tear down this wall.
The question is asked, who's pulling the strings?
Wolves
A grand
hiding
chessboard.
nearby,
Kissinger.
whispering, do or die around
Born from the
me.
ashes of a world at war. You'll find us in the shadows.
You say your last
A threat rises in the east.
While I
Warfare is evolving. And all the world's a stage. Hey, what did the Mossad say? Through deception, we wage
There
war.
is another very important phase of warfare. It has as its target not the body, but the mind of the enemy.
Target psychological warfare is against the enemy's mind.
It is words and ideas.
Ammunition used by cyborg.
Its mission is to influence the thoughts of the enemy soldier, and at the same time
is expected and encouraged to study
Deceive,
foreign languages
persuade,
and the social sciences such as history,
change,
economics, and sociology. He must have a
influence.
broad and sympathetic understanding of all phases of human experience.
gripping at my skin, the walls of night closing.
We come in many
the
forms.
use of this force as an integral part of combat has now taken on new form.
We are everywhere.
Say my last goodbye.
A feeling in the dark. A message in the stars. Revolution. The grand chessboard. Ghosts in the machine. What are we? We are war. You get out of that a lot of color revolutions and destabilizations of governments and overthrowing of those same governments. If you have any thoughts on that real quick, and we'll play the second video. It's about 3 minutes, so we have to be quick on time, but go ahead if you do.
But if you realize that during that video, none of that was U.S. events. They were all events.
International events.
International events, right? Because if we're, it's okay if we're doing it to all these other people.
Yeah, if we do.
But to our own people, we would never do this to our own country.
Never. I'm a little man, and this is a little town. There must be a spark in little men that can burst into flame. John Steinbeck.
There are many people in the world who really don't understand.
The most powerful weapon
But we have never had to put a wall up to keep our people
in the hand of the oppressor
Freedom is indivisible.
is the
And
mind
when
of the
one
oppressed.
man is enslaved, all are not free.
Modern war has become a struggle for men's minds as well as for their bodies. Today, we face an enemy who spends enormous sums of money and manpower all over the globe in an attempt to subvert the thinking of the people of the free world, confuse, divide, and ultimately to subjugate.
It is a contest unlike any we have ever faced in our history as a nation.
Contest for the minds and hearts of people around the world.
When power corrupts, poetry cleanses. We must never forget that art is not a form of propaganda. It is a form of truth.
Behind every idea,
Find that control of emotions can be gained by understanding the stimulus response pattern.
a belief.
Many everyday things become associated with these primary stimuli, partly by a process called conditioning.
Behind every choice,
Strange, shadowy world. The doctored photograph, the misquotation, insinuation, and the lie.
invisible hands.
I think of fire in connection with emotion.
Behind every emotion, fire. Do you believe in the power of words and ideas?
You've got to get a hold of yourself.
We'll light our country and all who serve it, and the glow from that fire can truly light the world.
We believe.
Yes,
Cyborg.
modern warfare, our military leaders are finding that words and ideas are highly effective weapons.
Words and ideas are highly effective weapons. We'll play a very short clip of the last one here and then finalize our comments. If this one will, yeah, here we go. This one will play.
Goddamn army.
Loudspeakers and pamphlets being dumped from planes, war-torn countries, occupied countries.
There's another force applied in combat that we generally don't think of as a weapon of war. That weapon is words. Words are weapons.
Anything we touch is a weapon.
Telling the truth is the only way in which to influence people.
This is psychological warfare.
This is psychological warfare. All right, we have a very short time left on the show. Ryder, your final closing comments, please.
Well, did they just basically say that all of those events were psychological operations?
That's the impression you get from all three videos. Yes, the demoralization, the stabilization, the crises, the normalization, the overthrowing of governments, the undermining of regimes, the destabilization of the global society to move the chessboard and move the pieces around into a position that you want them in. It's all a psychological operation. That's the impression that you get.
So I guess my question would be, if we are doing that to all these other countries, who's doing that to us?
That's a great question. That's kind of explored in that movie, Leave the World Behind. You know, these pamphlets raining down on the cities, and some are in Arabic, some are in Korean, some are in, you know, different languages. We don't know who our enemy is. We have no idea who the enemy is. Could be in our own government.
That's what it seems like, because with these videos, it seems like that the military has taken responsibility for all of these foreign events everywhere. Like, they showed events from everything in there, all over the place. Okay, so if the military is taking responsibility for all of those events being psychological operations, who is responsible for the psychological operations that are happening inside of the United States? And if it is our own government and it is our military, which would be the correct way to look at it, if we are responsible for it happening everywhere else, why would we not be responsible for it happening on our own turf? Then something is very clearly wrong. If people watch this, if people watch this and say, "Oh, well, it's okay that we did all this stuff to all these other different countries," okay, and not look at it like, did we do this to ourselves? Are we currently doing this to ourselves inside of our own country? If you watch that and you look at it as, "Oh, well, it's okay that we did it everywhere else. It's fine. It's justifiable that we overthrew this other government. We did all these other psychological operations. We took out foreign leaders. We installed a new political government over there and overseas in a completely different country. But whenever it happens here, who's to blame when it happens here?"
And it's very clearly happening and has been happening here for a long time. It's probably a mixture of foreign governments, but it's also mostly our own intelligence agencies, our own corporations. It's a blend of those operations that are psychological mixed with political ideologies, subversive ideologies. And I guess it's the old adage, when you play with fire, you tend to get burned. I think at the very least, it's that. We've played with fire and we're getting burned. So who is like unto the beast? There's a lot of beasts. You make that decision, the final conclusion for yourself. Ryder Lee, thank you for coming on the show tonight. Ryder Lee is the host of Raised by Giants. He has a number of documentaries. Very quickly, where can listeners find you?
You can find me on YouTube at Raised by Giants, on Facebook at Raised by Giants, Instagram Raised by Giants Pod, and X at Raised by Giants 8, and watch my documentaries JFKX on Amazon Prime, Apple TV Plus, and Tubi, and as well as A Clockwork Shining on those exact same platforms. And be looking forward to my latest documentary that I'm currently working on that should be submitted at the first of the year. Thanks so much for having me on, brother. Really appreciate it. Always an honor and a privilege being on here and talking with you, brother.
You as well, Ryder. I appreciate the work that you do. Thank you so much for coming on the show tonight.